Okay? Did you want to be on?
Good morning. So good to see all of you. Thank you for coming today, and all of you who are tuning in online, we welcome you. It's great to be together. When we sing, when we agree together, things are so much easier. It's easier to believe. It's easier to pray. It's easier to grow and progress in the way of life. And so thank you for being here today. We are coming back to our series in Nehemiah, and I'm reminded of the great preacher, Tony Evans. He was also an adjunct professor at my school at Dallas Theological Seminary. He has a church in Dallas, Texas. His name is Tony Evans. And he's preaching a sermon series right now in our nation called American Idol. And he made this statement recently. He said, in our country, as Christians, we've lost home field advantage. And I thought that was a powerful statement. You know, in sports, as a team, you want to play on your home field because you know you'll be cheered on. And you know the other team that you're fighting against will get booed, and you'll have the support of the hometown fans. And the opposite is true when you play an away game. You're in that opposing environment, and they're not wishing you well. They're not cheering you on. They're actually booing for you. They don't want you to win. They don't want you to progress. And so it's much more difficult to learn to win in an opposing environment. He was just making that point. He's saying for Christianity, in the United States, we've lost home field advantage. And he, as someone who's led, again, in my life since I was in my 20s, watched and ministered. He was the chaplain of the Dallas Cowboys, and he's seen our country, and he's experienced the country with all of us in the last generation especially. And he's saying, you know, the Judeo-Christian ethic, the worldview, used to dominate our country. Not that everybody was a Christian, but they at least respected Christians and respected our faith and our convictions. And that is less and less true. More and more now, the main engines or institutions in our culture, like our education, like our entertainment industry, are very much opposed to Christianity. In fact, they're dismissing Christianity, and they're marginalizing serious Christians, making us appear radical, putting us in a negative light. And so for us, we have to learn to win in an opposing environment. We have to learn to win away games, because that's where we are now. And fortunately, in our series in Nehemiah, that's where the people were. As they tried to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem, they were surrounded by neighbors who did not wish them well. And they had to accomplish their work in an opposing environment, and they did. And so it's exciting to watch and to learn from them as they dealt with opposition. So in our series so far, we talked about how they've been called to the work and then mobilized together, and then all their different assignments. Last week, Scott went over and how they approached this as a team. They had personal ownership in the work. They approached it as families. God kept a record of everyone and what they did, as he always does. He keeps a record of anyone who helps in his work and will reward what they do. But now in chapter 4, we come to opposition. We come to the fact that as they sought to build the walls, they sought to do God's work, they were opposed. It's why many people quit. It's why many people stop doing or won't even begin to do God's work, because it's not easy and there's a lot of opposition. And so that's what we're getting into now in chapter 4. Strong leaders, governors in the surrounding regions. In the north, it was Sanballat leading the Samaritans. Tobiah led the Ammonites in the east. Geshem led the Arabs to the south. And then there's mention of the Ashdodites, who were from a prominent city in Philistia to the west. And all of these folks did not want Jerusalem to succeed. They did not want them to progress. They did not want them to regain their former glory. And that certainly included getting their walls rebuilt around Jerusalem. I know during my senior year in high school, I played basketball and never got over it, and so I'm still talking about it. But one of the games that we played my senior year was against a tough school, a rival that was doing well, beating all the other teams in the Tidewater Conference. Their name was Norfolk Collegiate. And the reason they were so good, they had a good big man. He's about my height, but he had like 100 more pounds on him. His name was Jeff Talo, and he was just a bruiser. Another guy, tall forward named Mark, I just remember his first name. They were doing this particular play that no one could stop, and my coach scouted it. They would come down to the baseline on one side, close to the basket, about 6 feet away from the basket, and Jeff and Mark would just stand together, and the two guys guarding them, I was guarding Jeff, the big guy, would stand there, and then Mark would pop out on the baseline, and Jeff would turn and pick his defensive man, and then he would get the ball, and then Jeff would just turn and get me, or whoever's guarding him, on his back, and this guy Mark would just drop the ball right into him. And once he had the ball, 6 feet from the basket, with his defensive guy behind him, there's two things he could do. He could either make a layup or get fouled, but he was going to score. And he was going to foul out the big man, then nobody would be there to guard him for the rest of the game. So my coach scouted this out, and he came to me, and I'll never forget, I can still remember and tell you this story now, 90 years later. He came to me all week in practice, and he went over it and over it in my head. He goes, watch, they're doing it to every team, and they're scoring like 20, 25 points on this one play alone. Here's what they do, and he walked me through it. He said, Dean, the whole thing, if you have to go out of bounds, you got to get in front of Jeff when he turns around and tries to get you on his back. You got to be in front of him. And so I saw it coming. I remember the game came, and here are these two great athletes, two big guys, and I'm supposed to guard them. And I knew it was coming. Here they go. They're going to try it. And they tried to do the little pick. He pops out, gets the ball. He turns around and tries to throw it into Jeff. And I'm standing there right in front of him. I'm loving it. They tried it one more time. They got so frustrated, they gave it up, didn't try it for the rest of the game. I mean, won by 90 points. I was just kidding. That was in my fantasy. Two guys coming with the same play, and they're beating all the teams in the Tidewater Conference. Coach looks and sees film. He watches it. He scouts it out. He brings it to me. I'm ready for it, and it doesn't beat us. Why should it? Well, there's two enemies. There's two forces that come against God's people and have for years and gotten so many people to quit. And we're watching film on it in chapter 4 of Nehemiah, and you can see it coming in your life, and don't let it. It's like enough already this morning or this week when I've been preparing for it. I'm thinking, how many times do we have to give up? How many times do God's people have to quit? Just the same two things, and we can't figure it out and see it coming and overcome it and keep working like the people do in this story. They were human, they're weak, they're failing just like you and me. But they figured it out, they overcame it, they got the wall built, and they got to the second part of the book and all the rejoicing and the spiritual renewal that would result. And I want that for you. The two oppositions, like those two players in my story, the two opponents are discouragement and fear. We get discouraged and we're afraid. And so we either don't do God's work or we quit. And today we're going to look at discouragement. They're both in this chapter, Nehemiah 4. Just out of time, we're going to look at mostly discouragement. Fear will be in view. We'll see that, but we'll focus more on it next week. But discouragement and fear are two very common forces that have to be overcome if you're going to continue for a lifetime to serve God in His work, to be involved in meaningful work and the joy that comes, the sense of productivity that comes from that. Okay, so let's read, and you'll see what I mean. Nehemiah chapter 4, and we'll just read the first 10 verses and watch for the discouragement and the fear as it comes against God's people as they try to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. Here we go. Nehemiah chapter 4, starting with verse 1. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews, and in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, "What are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble burned out as they are?" Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what they are building, even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. Now, Nehemiah prays. This is his prayer in response to this opposition that's coming against the workers. Here's his prayer starting in verse 4. Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Not a typical prayer you'll find anywhere in the New Testament, but in the Old Testament, you'll find this prayer a lot. It's called an imprecatory prayer, and it reveals the judgment, not the forgiveness, not the love, but the judgment of God, his passion to judge the things that are coming against his work. Verse 6, so we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all their heart. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard that the repairs to Jerusalem's walls had gone ahead and that the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God, and we posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. And we'll stop right there. That's enough for today. And you can see we're starting to get into fear, not just discouragement, starting to get into the strategy against fear. But today we're going to stop and just look at discouragement. Two strong governors, two powerful leaders commiserating together, uniting together, and sort of this exponential effect that comes out from them as they discuss back and forth critical thoughts about the people who are doing the work. And this is having a burdensome effect on the people. They're wearing out under these thoughts. Will they ever finish? And this is resonating with the people. And so they go on. Not only do they knock down the people, they call them feeble, but they say, will you be able to revive the rubble into stones? They insult their labor. They say, a fox could jump on what you're building and could knock it down. And so this is where we begin. Powerful people and their potential to discourage. They're using their influence. They're using their capability to be a burden, not a blessing. And so I want to start there just generally speaking. Are you powerful? Yes. The only question is, who are you powerful to? I want you to think about those people. How are you using your power? What would your kids say? What would your grandchildren say? What would your employees say? What would your spouse say? Your friends, whoever you have a big presence to, whoever you have an impact on, is that impact for discouragement or for empowerment, encouragement, and blessing? God wants you to use your power, and he wants me to use my power to bless, to encourage, not to discourage, not to criticize, not to just be more negative, more of the problem in the lives of the people who are looking to us. Now, I'll be honest, I'm around leaders all the time. I am one, and I lead leaders. And so this week, as I'm preparing this message, studying, I'm especially sensitive to it. Almost every leader that I was around, and it's not even their fault, we're very critical. And so this is the next key statement if you're keeping notes. Leaders can be very critical. I wish I had a tape recorder. I could play it. Every leader I met with, they were criticizing. It was the topic of conversation. Politicians, first and foremost. Can you believe the debates? Boom, 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 negative, negative, negative. Not even faulting it. There's so much material for criticism. Coaches of teams, ball teams, very much criticized. They could do it better in 10 ways. Here's 50 ideas for how to make that better. And they're not doing it, and it's not a good experience because they're not a good coach. Teachers, even pastors, family members, so many folks. It's just part of being a leader. You notice things, and you have ideas, and you're responsible to fix them. And so So it's not your area, it's not what God's calling you to do, but you can't help it but sort of speak into somebody else's thing and be critical. It happens all the time. Leaders do this without even thinking. And here's my point. Any of us who are leaders, and we're all leaders, we all have an influence, we all have a direction, we should all want to take people with us in a good direction in our life. Our criticism is not what's going to lead to progress. Our criticism is not what's going to bring people where they need to go, or get them to follow us, or keep them following us, or sustain and strengthen them in the work. Instead, it's going to be our encouragement. That's the magic. That's the power, the miracle that causes people to follow you. It's not your criticism. You are critical because you're a leader, but that's not what will get your children or your friends or your spouse or your employees to progress, to improve. It'll take encouragement, positivity, reinforcement, empowerment. And so just making that point, as we see, first of all, leaders can be very critical. Now, the other side of this statement is leaders are often criticized. Not only are they critical, but when they get into their project, when they accept the responsibility, when they begin to drive, when they begin to lead, then they are often criticized, which brings discouragement. This is the flip side. Any leader, once they get to work, will immediately experience criticism. Okay? The minute we step forward to lead, we begin to be compared to others who led in that same position. And there's 50 ways to do it, and you're not doing it the way they did it. So I like that other flavor better. I like strawberry, you're vanilla. I am already thinking of 50 other ways you could be improved. But, I'm not you, but still, I'm going to criticize what you do. Any leader who accepts responsibility will immediately begin to experience criticism. There is no way to do it, to lead in a way that would please all of those who are following you, or to do it the way that they want it done. So folks will not tend to focus on your strengths, they'll focus on your weaknesses. There'll be many backseat drivers, many armchair quarterbacks. And this is just par for the course. So you got to be able to deal with that if you're leading. And the people here, as they step forward to cause God's city to progress, God's people to progress, they're experiencing this criticism. We're looking in, we're seeing it happen. Now, these people were not stonemasons. This was not their profession. As we saw last week, they were perfumers and goldsmiths. There were priests doing this work. Priests don't have any clue on how to rebuild a wall any more than I would as a pastor. There were families working together with their children. So they were vulnerable to criticism. They didn't understand the pace and the progress of a construction project like this, so their goals were unrealistic. And they thought it would get done a lot sooner. And it's the classic case of, are we there yet? From a child that doesn't get how long the trip was going to take. These people are about 4 weeks into the project, and that's long enough to get tired, but it's not long enough to see much in the way of results. And they don't understand the stages. They don't understand the progress. They're not professional stone masons. So at this point in the work, it was a bad mirror for their capability. It was a bad reflection on them for their potential, for what it was going to become or what the results would be in time. Later, when they had accomplished more, that would be a feather in their cap. They could look and say, oh my goodness, by the end of this chapter, they could see half the walls, or the walls built back to half their height, and all the breaches were closed. But at this point, there's still so much rubble, and they're vulnerable, and the criticism begins to resonate with them. I know for me, every project winds up here at some point. It starts out with great enthusiasm, and then eventually everybody's tired. Everybody thought it would happen sooner. Everybody's looking at the routine, and they're scrambling, and they feel feeble. So when someone comes along and says, you're feeble, and what you're doing is it's not happening, if the results aren't there, then you can find it easy to believe that. You say, yes, I'm feeble. Yes, I'm weak. Because you're feeling tired. You're not weak. You're just tired. So it says in verse 10, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there's so much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. I know for me, when I'm tired, the phone rings, And, I'll start out like when I'm rested, when I've had a good week and I've got a lot of strength. The phone rings, I'm like, oh, there's a wonderful opportunity. I wonder who it is. Hello, how can I help you? But when I'm tired, that same phone rings, and I'm like, I know who that is. Ugh. Same thing. Now for these people, the rubble that was challenging them at the beginning is now discouraging to them. Why? Because they're tired. And they feel weak, they feel like they're feeble, but they're not. They're actually stronger than they've ever been in their life. They're just tired. They're tired like a great weightlifter feels tired at the end of 15 repetitions of his maximum amount of weight. He's come to the point of failure. He can't do one more. He feels weak. He is not weak. He is strong. He's just tired. And if he waits and rests, the next day he will be even stronger as his muscles come back. And so this is the thing. They need to pace themselves. They need to realize, no, you've never been better. You are amazing. Look at you, you perfumer, you goldsmith, you priest, you family member, you child. Look at what you're doing. You're going to get in the Bible. You rebuilt the walls around Jerusalem. You hang in there. You're going to finish this, and it's going to be amazing. Have you ever quit God's work because of discouragement and tiredness? Have you ever stopped teaching children or parenting, being excited about parenting, something you've been doing, set up to do with your children? Of course, we all do. And so we come with Nehemiah and we watch him and we see right away the first thing he does is he prays. So this is our next statement. When we are discouraged, we must pray. Nehemiah's first response, as we see 8 other times in the book, whenever there's a problem, his first response is to pray. And this is one of those 8 times. And so what a good example he is. When you're discouraged, go back to the one who gave you the courage in the first place. And when you do, you'll find that courage coming back, that direction coming back, those burdens lifting off of you. I'll tell you this, Tim Keller says this, it's not the work that'll wear you out, it's the work under the work. No, I'm serious. When God makes you a leader and he gives you an assignment, the weight of that is heavy enough, you can't afford to carry around discouragement, burdens that you need to give to God. So you come to God, you cast your burden on him, he takes it, he lifts it off, he says, good thing, because you don't have any time or energy to waste on this. Because I've given you plenty of things to do, and it's going to take everything you have to do those. So come to me, it's not the work, it's the work under the work, it's the discouragement. It's trying to please other people. And this is the other thing Nehemiah didn't do. He didn't talk back to these governors. He didn't because they didn't call him. They weren't the ones who got his attention when he was in the winter capital of the world empire in a cushy job. He didn't give up that job for the king of the world to come and please 2 local governors. Sanballat and Tobiah weren't the ones who called Nehemiah or provided all the materials for Nehemiah. They weren't the ones who rallied the people around him. They were not the gracious hand of God on his life, see? So he didn't go to them. He went to God. He wasn't a men pleaser. He wasn't someone who was trying to win a popularity contest. So he didn't have to have everyone voting for the project. But he did have to have God. So he went to God. So when we're discouraged, we must pray. Secondly, when we're discouraged, we must persevere. Because every time Nehemiah prayed, he always did something. He didn't just pray. As powerful and as wonderful as prayer is, it can never be that the only thing we do is just pray. So he prayed and then he persevered and he got the people to keep going, keep working. And we see that they make it to the halfway point by the end of this chapter. And by the end of chapter 6, they finish the walls in less than 2 months. They make it through and their hearts are renewed and they don't stop. And so they get to the second half of the book with all of its joy and its spiritual renewal. They'd have never made it there if they quit. If they'd gotten discouraged and quit, they'd have never made it. So I wonder, how much do we never experience because we quit, because we allow discouragement to set the agenda, to define our life? It's like, no way, God is still calling me. I'm encouraged. I'm going to talk to him, and now I'm going to keep going. And then pretty soon, sooner than you even think, that rubble starts to come together. and you start to see real result, and it becomes a feather in your cap. And it becomes a good mirror to you of the God who is using, calling, and blessing you and providing for you. So when we're discouraged, we must persevere. The verse in the New Testament that's so good on this is 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm, let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. The work in itself is such a therapy. It's so invigorating. Just do the work and it'll bring your spirit back up. Don't think about it. Don't let the wheels spin in your mind. Don't interact with this criticism and get all burdened and down about it. Just keep doing the work itself, feeling God's power. That sense of productivity in a fresh way, day after day, is such a means of grace. So they kept going. They persevered. And then we have this imprecatory prayer. I want to bring this up. Nehemiah prayed this prayer not because he was mad, losing his temper. It wasn't a personal vendetta. It wasn't a chip on his shoulder. He was legitimately upset. He had righteous anger. He was experiencing in his prayer what God feels when his workers are discouraged. Because when people work for God, it's such a miracle. And so God protects that miracle. And when somebody comes against it and criticizes it and discourages it, and as a result, the people stop and they quit and the work doesn't get done and they just get stuck in their life, God's upset about that. So, normally we'd pray, we say, Lord, forgive our enemies, and they don't know what they're doing, just please forgive them. That's our normal. But in this case, a little bit of God's anger shines through how passionate he is about us experiencing the miracle of doing his work. And that's a delicate balance, and just starting it is a miracle, and then keeping it up is a miracle. And so all of that is protected by God, and he's angry when it gets thrown off. And so if there's discouraging thoughts in your mind, I just want you to know, when you pray, God will be like, don't let that discourage you. I'll go to bat for you. I feel very strong, God would say to you, I feel very strong about your doing my work, believing in me. Hang in there. You're going to see your result. I want you to have that joy. I want us to have that joy together. So all of that's reflected in the imprecatory prayer. And I just want to stress all the people who were serving to rebuild the walls, they were volunteers. This was not their job where they made money. And so it's a representative of all nonprofits, which is where most meaningful work takes place today for most people. They don't get paid for doing the work that matters the most in this world. Most of us have to do jobs, and we look at the work and we say, well, I'm thankful for it, and it puts food on the table, and I'm able to do it for God, and I hope to be a witness where I am, but it's not the most meaningful work that's taking place in the world, what I do at my job. And so where do we find that work? God leads us to volunteer somewhere and not make any money. And so where some people are paid to be good, we have to be good for nothing. And we always make that joke, but it's true. Most people who do most of what's important in the world are a nonprofit. They're not making money. They're not making much money. And they're sacrificing that to do what's most meaningful. So it's even more of a miracle, because why would you be good for nothing? Well, only if you were called by God, only if you were sustained by God, only if you had to keep believing in God through a long period of time and didn't see the result you were hoping for. And all the time you're opposed and everything, God's going to bat for you because you're one of his volunteers. And that's a miracle. These were all volunteers. We stress this, and I want to bring it back today. We're having a membership meeting after second service, and so it always reminds me of our basic pathway and our vision. But our pathway is that everyone would love God by coming to church on Sunday, by having a personal relationship with God through the spiritual disciplines that we teach, that we practice together, Then we live in community. That's a small group where we can know and be known, where we can fellowship, have people support and carry our burdens, and we carry their burdens, and there's shepherding, and that's live in community. But then that third step that we think everybody should do, we think everybody should serve the world. And that happens in the church to make it better, or in the community as the church extended. We all serve. We don't get paid. We serve. We volunteer. It's a huge way we connect with what's most meaningful in the world. Not like our jobs. As much as they provide and give opportunities to share Jesus, and we do it as unto the Lord, they're not the most meaningful work will be when we volunteer. So we stress that without apology. We think everybody should serve. We think all of you, as you keep taking the next step under our leadership, that we should all come to the point where we have some kind of ministry. Now, two key ways that we can all do this, and I just want to close with these today, are mentoring and then just general volunteering. Mentoring, this one's so easy. And you do it with just one other person, but you can feel God and you can begin to build that wall and cause that sense of productivity and progress to happen in one other person's life. And let me tell you something, you don't have to be perfect. You can still have sins in your life, struggles, failures, things that you're working on. You're still in process. You do not have to be perfect. You do not have to know everything. You don't have to have the answer to every question. You just have to be a little bit further along than somebody else is spiritually or on the road of life. And so you commit to care for them and pray for them. That's the simple thing at its basic root. When you mentor someone else, you're just joining them so they're not facing their key challenges in their life alone. And they'll tell you what they are in their own time as they're comfortable to share. They'll say, yeah, here are my biggest struggles, challenges, burdens. And I would love not to be alone in that. Can you help me? People who don't have a mentor are like people trying to carry a couch all by themselves. And they just it'd be so much easier if there was someone else coming and taking the other side of that couch and carrying it with them. And that's what we can do. We can mentor. And you can add other things, like you can study some part of the Bible or read a book together. That's a good inspirational book. You can serve in a ministry together of some kind. You can enjoy a hobby, but those are all optional. At its basic root, mentoring is simply saying, I care for you, I want to pray for you, we'll meet regularly so you're not alone in your life. Now, as much as you feel comfortable, just tell me so I can share life with you. That's a powerful way, a simple way we can all do God's work and help somebody progress. Like we see the progress in the ministry taking place in the book of Nehemiah. And I want to say this is a crucial way we hand the baton to the next generation. That's our vision. Our vision is handing this church to the next generation as well as to those who don't know Jesus. And one of the key ways that we won't just age out as a church, but that we'll actually hand the baton to the next generation, this church, is for those of us who are older to mentor those who are younger. Come alongside somebody who's way farther back in the path of life. We who are older, and I'm 59, we have life experience, we have resources, we have discretionary time. We've come through the toughest parts of our life, and now we have the chance to come alongside those who are right in the middle of those difficult parts and are about to face other parts they don't even see coming. And God's like, I helped you, I blessed you, you've got a ton of wisdom, now you help them. Help and pass the baton to the next generation as you just mentor one-on-one, one person to the next. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know everything. They don't have to say everything to you, just whatever way they feel comfortable. You come alongside, care for them, pray for them. And I want to just say, doing this work as an older person is more rewarding than our leisure activities. That sense of God using us to help someone else brings us way more joy. And I'll just say, wouldn't you rather burn out for Jesus than rust out? After all God's done for us, all He's blessed us, and we know this, those of us who are older, don't we want to go out with a bang instead of a whimper? Let's finish with a bang, and God's calling us to that. And it's as simple as coming alongside one other person who's younger and just saying, hey, how can I help you? I'm not acting like I'm some guru or anything. I can care. I've got time. I can pray for you. You won't be alone. Young people would love that. People in their 30s and 40s, people facing things, typical things in life we've come through. It's a huge way that we can begin, but we won't get paid for that. And yet it's one of the most meaningful things we could possibly do, and it will hand this church off. How else are other leaders going to come alongside of us if we don't develop them, if we don't take them under our wing? And I know in my life, whenever I've given this, Jesus did this. He gave himself to just a few individuals like this, life on life. This is where it happens, the transfer of leadership. This is where the baton gets passed, is when we actually do this work, the work of mentoring. The other key way I would apply it, because people were saying, well, Dean, you give sermons, but what are you expecting us to do? What was the assignment at the end of your sermon? The other way is this: volunteer. Volunteer here in this church or in the community for the sake of our church, as our church extends to be a light in this community. Here are some fresh opportunities. Growing up in the middle of a pandemic has caused many of our children to have anxiety in their hearts. You can commit to a ministry that's just reopened, that helps minister the love, the peace, the stability of Jesus to our children, while our adults are able to have their batteries recharged in here, in church, without having to do that children's ministry in this room. And so you can serve in that ministry with our Kids Quest children's ministry. You can lead a small group that's even 3 to 4 people. And it can be a discipleship, spiritual emphasis type of group like I'm talking about with mentoring, and expand it out, make it a little bit bigger. One of the ideas coming from our small group ministry is, why don't you step forward and lead a group of 3 or 4 folks that are just coming together for that greater synergy and energy to grow spiritually together. A flexible and fun way to serve is to be on our welcome team, whether here in the building in the foyer or moderating online during our services. Or you can join our media team and/or help take pictures at our events. We provide the training, no experience needed. I'm giving you practical ways to step forward and get involved in making our church better. We all see progress. We have joy. This is God's work today. The Help Ministry, led by Mandy Miller, is getting so excited with fresh, creative ways to minister to those in need during the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas are just around the corner, and we've got some awesome new ideas, and Mandy would love for you to be part of that with her. I know for me, I'm excited, even though I do a lot of God's work in my job that I get paid for. I'm excited to volunteer with the basketball ministry at our school, FCA. I'm going to be an assistant coach. We got our first coaches meeting on Tuesday, and I can't wait to volunteer. I know a lot of the joy in my life is going to come making that commitment outside of my normal responsibilities here as a senior pastor. I'm also excited to serve as a precinct election official in November. And again, just ways to serve in the community, so many ways. Get involved. I would give you that appeal. And here's how you can respond. If you'd like help and to become connected, text the word SERVE to this number. You can put it on the screen. Text the word SERVE to 740-224-2494. You'll immediately get a link to a digital Connect card. You just fill a couple blanks out, hit submit, and then we'll guide you. We won't badger you, but we'll guide you. If you really want to be connected, just text the word SERVE, fill out the Connect card, hit submit, and we'll hook you up. We're again, just thrilled for all of us. If you'd like to mentor, we'd love to connect you with someone. If you'd like to serve in any of these or other areas of ministry, we'd love to help connect you. All right, let's pray. Would you bow with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for you being the source of our encouragement, you controlling our motivation, you being the one who inspires and empowers us. I thank you that will always be stronger than any discouragement that we face. Lord, for many of us, we are in the stage of ministry where we don't see the results that we'd like. And it's taking a long time. And so that seems to be when we need your strength the most and when most of the work has to take place. And so would you give us that grace, whether we're raising children or serving in a ministry with our children here or our youth or whatever it happens to be. Would you renew us? Would you encourage us and empower us? Father, we want to do it for you and not for results. We don't want to be men pleasers, and so give us the grace, Lord. When we are criticized, when people don't cheer us on and they're not for us, help us to just find our strength in you. And so, Lord, I pray that would even be there to start many of us in doing your work. And I pray that we would be a church that serves, just so much serving. Thank you, Lord. This is our prayer. Give us the ultimate joy of seeing your work done. And bless us now as we remember Jesus, as we worship you. For it's in his name we pray. Amen.